A passage that I often have occasion to come back to is the passage in which she sort of explains to him that they're not actually that these souls aren't actually here. And I
Yes.
think that like this is the one reason why it fascinates me is because we think of we like in modern society, you will often encounter a kind of casual dismissal of the medieval mind as like primitive and superstitious and all this stuff. And in
They love
fact,
torture.
yeah, they're super into torture, right? Like they did
Yeah.
they did a lot of all these bad things, and
Mhm.
like that passage, which I've read a million times on the show, is so much more sophisticated about the relationship between body and soul than almost anything you'll hear today. I mean, it basically, in some sense, seems to me to be saying, your senses are a conduit, and the
Mhm.
thing that they are a conduit to on this earth is like you presume at least some sort of object that is outside of you, but there's no reason why they can't be a conduit to something quite a bit higher. And in fact, that's why she says the Bible condescends to speak of God as having hands and feet, but meaning something else. Like that's,
Yes.
um, an incredibly profound idea. And I think related also to what you were saying about, I love that line, heaven is not only in my eyes, like
Mhm.
that she's looking at something and what she's
Mhm.
looking at, and um, that makes her so beautiful to him is kind of a difficult realization. I mean, is there a point, do you think, at which Dante is able to achieve that realization? Like when does that for you happen in the poem?
Ah, that's a great question too. I think that he says a prayer actually in the very beginning of Paradiso,
Mm.
where he's praying to Apollo,
Yeah, that
which
got me. That's really interesting. Go on.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's nuts that he starts out with Apollo because maybe he should be praying to someone else.
Like, isn't
But
that a isn't that a false god? Right. Yeah, exactly.
yes, but he needs the god of poetry right then because he knows that he cannot possibly describe what he's trying to describe.
Mm.
But and so he needs all the help he can get. But this prayer is he says basically the line is come into my chest and breathe there because he wants to be and he makes a reference to this Ovidian character named Marsyas.
Mm.
And this character is this a nymph, I believe, who was actually challenged Apollo to a poetry competition, which if we know anything, it's that you should not challenge gods to competitions.
It's
Um,
just the worst idea. I know. I
it's the
think
worst
Marsyas.
idea.
I'm going to be that annoying classicist here, and maybe
Please.
I'm speaking off the top of my head, but I think Marsyas is actually like a satyr or like one of these kind
Oh,
of,
you're right.
which
You're
is
right. Yes.
in some small way significant because those are the fleshy, those are the sex creatures, right? They're the sort of like
That's right.
urgent physical desires. So yeah, so he makes this reference to
Yes.
Marsyas, who's like
Yes.
what drawn out of his flesh somehow, right?
Yes, he's flayed alive
Yeah,
as punishment
yeah.
for this, incredible blasphemous act. And the Ovidian text is amazingly graphic. It describes that you can see the like all of the sinews and the blood and the muscles and all these parts of the flesh, and then it like creates this river of blood and fluid. And so for Dante to be bringing that into this like we're in heaven now, and now we're thinking about this character. Ugh. And it's like
Yeah.
it reminded me a little bit of the Augustine quotation that you just read, where it's
Mm.
like it's sort of just this like body like can't
Yeah.
why can we get some sanctification in here? Like how do I get and what he wants to be flayed alive so that he can have this God come and breathe into his chest, into his heart, so that he can just be filled with the divine because he kind of wants to just cast off all of this troublesome body weight literally that
Mm.
he's carrying. And so it starts there that he's like agonizing over this in the beginning. And then as he goes through, he just gradually, still feels like his desire not start to calm down, but his desire grows.
Huh.
Like his intensity about his desire for Beatrice and for God and for knowledge and for all the things he really, really desires, like
Huh.
goes into higher and higher and higher gear as he gets closer to heaven.
Wow.
And that's what this is not about repression. It's not learning to stop liking girls or stop having appetite for rich foods or whatever it is, or put away all that book knowledge so that you can focus on the spiritual. Like there's none of that.
Mm.
It's the opposite of that here. It's like, it's, that famous C.S. Lewis quotation that says, the job as the educator is not to cut back jungles, but to irrigate deserts.
Mm.
I'm paraphrasing something like that,
Mm-hmm.
and this is about how the act of sanctification and becoming more holy in the learning and growing process is to make your desire greater so that you're desiring better and better objects.
It's so apt to cite Lewis there. In fact, that was on the tip of my mind. I mean, this is a great theme of Lewis's, that the problem is you don't desire enough. I mean, in The Great Divorce, there's that guy who struggles with lust, and it's like I think it's a salamander that has to get crushed, but then it turns into this great steed that he then rides off. And I mean, it's almost a Dante-esque moment in Lewis.
Very
and
much.
I think Lewis loved this, like me, and it sounds like you. I think Lewis loved Paradiso most of all, the Canticles, for this reason.